Spat has ensued between the Patriotic Alliance and the Democratic Alliance over Clause 24 in the Government of National Unity Statement of Intent. DA Federal Chairperson Helen Zille hit out at the ANC during an interview, saying it never consulted it before admitting the PA in contravention of the said clause. Patriotic Alliance Head of Strategy, Charles Cilliers, joins us now for more reaction. Charles, good to have you, and thank you very much for your time. It was a bruising campaign trail, and there were a lot of blows that were exchanged between the Patriotic Alliance and the Democratic Alliance. Are we likely seeing a case of the parties not finding space to bury the hatchet and say, let's now get out of the campaign trail and actually look at building a government?
Yeah, good evening. I think that's probably a good place to start the discussion, because the PA and the DA are probably famous for being at each other's throats most often. We as the PA tend to feel that the DA fights dirty when it comes to us, and that we campaign more on our own merits and our own strengths. And we feel that there's a lot to be desired in the way that the DA communicates about the PA, but we were willing to put that aside for the sake of the GNU.
And where was the loss in translation, or the disconnect here? Because it seems Clause 24 does say and that there must be a consultation before the admission of new partners, but also the ANC had been very clear that it is consulting broadly, including EFF, MK Party, and everybody would have wanted to be. So where do you think the disconnect would have been in the DA's understanding of what that meant, and I suppose what you are understanding as well?
Look, it's really quite obvious that whether it's intentional or not, Helen Zille just doesn't understand what this statement of intent is. For her to say that she's a founding member of this is ridiculous, right? The ANC has never said that they're looking for founding members. They're looking for partners in the GNU, for people who are willing to be part of this GNU. And the PA was actually in a meeting with the ANC before the DA ever got to a meeting with the ANC. And we made it clear that we're willing to be part of a GNU if that is the framework that they go with, because at that stage we weren't even clear on, is it going to be a grand coalition, is it going to be a simple coalition, or is it going to be a GNU? And we told the ANC, go and make up your minds around what it is, but we'd be willing to get into a coalition on whatever framework it is. And then they decided on the GNU, and we were very clear to say that's fine, we can be part of this. And we actually signed the very same statement of intent on the same day as the DA. So I'm not sure where these delusions of grandeur from the DA, and particularly from Helen Zille, come from, that she's supposedly very special in all of this, and that she's got the right to gatekeep the rest of us. The parties to the GNU will only be decided once the cabinet positions have been agreed upon and the government's in place. And it's only at that point that that particular clause will kick in. And it's only at that point that if another party wants to join, once we have actually allocated all of that and agreed on all the finer points, that we can then say, for example, if Arise Mzansi isn't part of it now, if they want to join later, then we will all have to be consulted. So she's getting a little ahead of herself, but we're used to that with Ms. Zille.
Would you then maybe, does this, if we were to stretch this a little bit, add credence to the challenge that was raised by what we saw, at least on the eve of the first sitting of the National Assembly, but what is called the Progressive Caucus? It said, look, this piecemeal approach of approaching us one by one is a little bit of a problem. Why don't you just come, put us all in one room, give us the statement. If we are signing it, we're all signing it at the same time on that day. We would have avoided this confusion.
Look, I think we're all in uncharted waters here. The ANC is trying to navigate through this new reality of a hung government for the first time. They've decided to do it consulting with parties one by one. There's no reason that can't work. Obviously, there's other ways that could work as well. And I don't think that it's necessarily that approach that's the problem here. The problem here is that the DA is trying to boss the room, and they're trying to basically squeeze concessions out of this thing. And when you see tweets like the one that they released, I think it was earlier today, talking about how they are the anchor tenant, or they're the anchor party of this coalition. It raises questions around what exactly is an anchor party in a government of national unity. That doesn't sound like a very unitary thing to say. So I think that they're going to have to do some serious soul searching around the attitude that they bring into this government, because arrogance is the reason why so many of their coalitions fell apart, particularly with us. And then, they were trying to take us to the Constitutional Court, for example, to make us abide by a coalition agreement. And that's ridiculous, right? So you're looking at people here who believe that some of these documents are legally binding, where a statement of intent like this is like a agreement to agree, right? Nobody's going to be able to take this to a court of law and force, Fikile Mbalula or any of us into a dock and somehow concede on a legal basis, right? This is being done on a handshake right now, and it's being done on trust, right? So I really hope that this isn't an example of the kind of attitude that we're going to have to deal with for the next 5 years, because it's not going to work.
Yeah, that's where I was going. Is this an indication of things to come? I mean, already the dispute resolution mechanism would require that, if you don't reach consensus on a matter, broad consensus would mean 60% of the parties. Is the GNU going to find itself in a situation where it cannot be able to broker that 60%? As Helen Zille has already said, they've got about, 30% in that GNU.
Well, it's an interesting one, right? Because even if you read the document, there's now seems to be confusion around what that clause even means. Does it mean that it's 60% of the parties in the GNU, or, as the document literally says, 60% of how the National Assembly is constituted? Because if it's that, then it means that the ANC and the DA will have to agree, because it doesn't matter what the rest of us do, even if we stomp our feet and wave our hands around, we're not going to reach 60% consensus without the DA. And if it is a matter of it being proportional to who's in the GNU, then the ANC is probably going to sit on 58%. And then the DA is going to get frozen out. And then they're going to have to try to be part of this consensus. So I know that I would personally prefer a simple majority of, if whatever reaches 50%, but then, the ANC is going to have 58% and they could govern without us. So I can understand that they're going for a proportion of the representation in Parliament, right? I know the ANC was trying to make that about 50+1, which is democracy. The DA forced that concession. So if that's the way we're going to have to do things, then this GNU is always going to be held over a barrel by the DA. We'll have to see if that's a good or a bad thing. It's too soon to cast judgment on how this is actually going to work.
Right, quick one before I let you go. It seems your leader has had a change of mind and view around Ronaldo and his apology. And he has now withdrawn his earlier statement and saying he's going to be working hard to get him out of Parliament. What's the position there?
Look, I think when you see what happens with Gayton, right, he's always about trying to give people second chances. And we spoke about Ronaldo before I even came on the show tonight. And he's of the view that if it's true that Ronaldo said these things, and I mean, it does seem that there's some evidence now that he said these things many years ago, then Ronaldo's going to have to go and face the consequences of that, and we'll see how this plays out. I don't want to speak too prematurely on the matter. But one thing you must know about Gayton McKenzie is that he will never stand in judgment of people who've made mistakes, because he's made mistakes and he's been forgiven by society, and he's been spending his entire adult life trying to repay to society and to make up for it. So he'll never stand in judgment of anyone. But the reality is that if this is true, then we expect that Ronaldo must own it. must come clean to the country, and we can take it from there. We've had people in the PA who've been fired for making racist utterances. We send them away. If they're rehabilitated and they're sorry for what they did, then we invite them back in. We don't believe anybody should be written off forever. And we believe South Africa is actually a country based on forgiveness, and we're not going to change that tradition. And we're very proudly about that in the PA. So at some stage, we may even invite Ronaldo to join the PA, if he's really gone out there and had a proper change of heart, because we believe in second chances.
Charles, appreciate your time. Thanks so much for coming on. Charles Cilliers.